What happens when you try to corner a man who's fought his whole life on screen and off? Sylvester Stallone walked into Good Morning America expecting a simple interview. Not a real battle under studio lights across from a former political strategist turned host. It began with smiles and nostalgia, the kind of warmth that lowers your guard. But behind George Stephanopoulos' questions was something colder, calculated. When the tone shifted from playful to personal, the gloves came off. New York's skyline was just starting to glow as the Times Square studio doors opened and Stallone stepped in. No entourage, just a quiet nod to the receptionist, a polite morning to a staffer juggling coffee, and a handshake for the producer backstage. He'd done this 1,000 times. Promo interview, 8-minute segment, a few safe questions, maybe a rocky nod, plug the film, smile, done. He wasn't expecting a war zone. Casual but alert, he headed to the green room. His publicist, Andrea, stayed close, whispering last-minute notes. Talk final redemption. The redemption arc, the father-son angle. George may ask legacy. Shouldn't be anything heavy. Stallone nodded. Legacy's fine. Aging's inevitable. He smiled, the kind that says, I've been doing this longer than most of you have been alive. In the control room, Stephanopoulos reviewed cards, not the ones the publicist saw. These were handwritten, last minute, marked in red. A junior producer hesitated. George, we're staying on the movie promo, right? We'll get there, he said. Countdown. Live in 3, 2. Cue theme, cue lights, cue split screen of smiling hosts and fans outside. He's the man who brought us Rocky, the face behind Rambo, and at 77, he's still going strong. Please welcome Sylvester Stallone. Applause warm, genuine. Stallone took his seat opposite George. Relaxed smile, solid handshake. Good to be here, he said. That deep gravel the world knows. George returned the practiced smile. Let's start with the new film, Final Redemption. It's heavy loss, regret, fatherhood. What drew you in? Stallone answered clearly and calmly. The script, aging, making peace with the past. His voice steady, his words measured. George nodded, attentive, but something flickered in his eyes. First act, still. Then the pivot. You mentioned aging. You've played fighters, soldiers, cops for decades. Some critics say maybe it's time to slow down. Do you feel that pressure? Light on the surface, edged underneath. Stallone chuckled. I don't run stairs like I used to, but storytelling doesn't age. The fight changes, that's all. It moves inside. George smiled. But isn't there a risk of becoming a parody of yourself? There are memes old Rocky still throwing punches. Doesn't that wear on you? Stallone didn't flinch, though his jaw tightened if you looked closely. I've heard that since Rocky II. If I'd listened, there'd be no Creed or Final Redemption. So, no, it doesn't wear on me. A polite applause. George glanced at his card and needed. Some say beyond Rocky and Rambo, your filmography is uneven, that those two roles carry the rest. Do you ever feel you're still riding the success of a character you created 50 years ago? Stallone tilted his head. I created something that resonated, something people still care about. That's not riding success. That's honoring it. George leaned in slightly. Sure, but it's been decades. Do audiences still connect with the tough guy persona, the lone wolf, the grizzled voice, the let's be honest, slurred cadence? Some folks say they can't understand half of what you say anymore. Laughter, nervous, scattered, came from the audience, not Stallone. He laughed, too, without warmth. Funny thing is, they understood me just fine when I said, Yo, Adrian? Or, it's not how hard you hit. It's how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. A stronger round of applause. That line always landed. George nodded stiffly, pressing on. I just wonder respectfully if the industry's moved on. If the Stallone brand doesn't carry the weight it used to, especially when the scripts feel familiar. That one landed harder. Stallone's smile was slow, cold. Maybe. Or maybe the world still needs fighters and I've got a few rounds left. George pushed. At what point is it self-parody? You're in your late 70s. Isn't it time to step back before the image fades? Stallone didn't smile or blink. George, he said, low and clear, images don't fade. People just stop looking. A crack in the table. Silence spread, crew audience, control room felt it. George sensed it and smiled wider. Fair enough. Let's pivot, family. Stallone nodded, unsuspecting. You've been public about your daughters, called them your proudest achievement. They're on covers, red carpets, social media getting attention. Stallone nodded. They re-smart. They've got their own voice. Of course, George said, adjusting. But there's criticism that you're too involved, managing their image too tightly. That it's about the Stallone brand more than their own path. Something in the room shifted. No sound, no flash, but clear. Stallone didn't move. He just looked at George and the temperature dropped. Calm seated, but the gloves were off. The comment hung longer than any applause. Stallone stayed unreadable, eyes fixed, like deciding if it was a joke or nerve. George, sensing the silence, doubled down. It's not just me, he said, flipping cards he already knew. Articles, analysts, some say you're more brand than parent now. Maybe using their spotlight to extend your own. Cold, clinical. Across from him, something changed. Stallone nodded once, as if filing the insult, then folded his hand on his knee. You done with that line of questioning? He asked, voice low. George smiled like over coffee. It's a fair question. I think our viewers know. Stallone cut in. Don't do that. Don't hide behind your viewers. If you've got something to say, say it. Don't drag the audience in to soften your punches. Still, come butt heavier. The room felt smaller. Okay, George said, shifting. Plainly, you're 77. Incredible career. But maybe it's time to ask, are you still relevant or just visible? The studio froze. Should we go to weather? A producer whispered. Let it roll, the ad breathed. Stallone leaned in, elbows on knees, voice measured. You know what's funny, George? Guys like you think relevance is Twitter trends and magazine covers. You want numbers. I measure by impact. George nodded slowly. Doesn't impact fade when the world stops listening? The world hasn't stopped, Stallone snapped. You muted the parts you don't want to hear. A low murmur. One clap, then silence. George tried to pivot and dug deeper. I'm asking what many think. Great movies, sure, but outside Rocky and Rambo, what really stuck? Stallone's brow tightened. So now we're editing history. I'm saying maybe you coasted a little, George shrugged. The voice, the mannerisms, they worked in the 70s and 80s. Do they work now? Sometimes people laugh at what you say. Not with you. At you dropped like a brick. Is that so? Stallone asked quietly. We've all seen the meme sly, George added with a smirk. Sometimes people can't even understand you. That drawl that Stallone thinks a punchline. Stallone held his gaze, then barely smiled. You know what people did understand, George? They understood, keep moving forward. They understood, go the distance. They understood a guy from the wrong side of the tracks could make something of himself. A longer silence followed. Stallone leaned back. You want to joke about my voice? Fine. I've had speech issues since birth. You think I chose to talk this way? George blinked. It's from forceps damage at birth, severed nerves, partial paralysis. This voice you're mocking wasn't an act. It was a wound I turned into a weapon. No one breathed. And here's something else, Stallone said, barely above a whisper. I didn't let that voice stop me. I wrote Rocky. I starred in it. I fought to keep the studio from replacing me. And nearly 50 years later, you're calling that fight a punchline. For the first time, George looked uncomfortable. The showman mask slipped. Stallone continued. People who laughed at my voice are the ones who never had to fight for theirs. They were born with microphones. I built mine from concrete. A few real, unprompted claps. I wasn't mocking you, Sly, George said, clearing his throat. I'm saying there's a perception. No, Stallone cut in. You weren't saying what people think. You were saying what you think. A pause. Then George shifted tactics. Let's go back to family. Stallone's shoulders stiffened, just a touch. Your daughters are talented, no question. But you've said you help manage their careers. Some say maybe a bit too much, that you're not letting them find their own voices. Stallone stared at him, silent. George pressed on. There's a theory you're grooming them for public life to carry the Stallone name. That you're still controlling the narrative, choosing events, interviews. That was it. Stallone leaned forward. His voice stayed calm, but the restraint was gone. George, if you say one more thing about my daughters, this conversation changes. George hesitated. Don't just anything, Stallone said, louder now. They're not part of this. You want to poke at Rocky? Go ahead. But my family, my daughters, you don't touch them. You don't talk about them. And you sure don't speculate about their lives for ratings. The cameras caught George blinking twice. Stallone adjusted his lapel. Mike didn't remove it, but something had shifted. The room felt electric, the hum of lights, the faint creak of Stallone's chair, the slow inhale that said, "You really just said that." George shuffled his cards for show. The smugness was gone, replaced by something hollow and unsure. But the damage was done. Sylvester, he said carefully, I'm not trying to offend. Our audience wants to understand the dynamic. Stallone raised a hand, slow, firm. George, I've had enough. The audience stilled. Stallone adjusted his mic again, this time unclipping it. You crossed the line. You brought my family into this. You questioned my worth, my relevance, my voice, and now you act like you're just asking questions. That isn't journalism. It's provocation. George leaned in slightly. Look, Sly, this is Good Morning America, not a press junket. We ask the hard stuff. No, George, Stallone cut in. You ambushed me. He set the mic gently on the glass table. The click sounded like a hammer strike. I came in good faith. You asked for an interview, not an inquisition. George forced a smile. Come on, we're just having a conversation. No, Stallone said, rising slowly. A conversation has respect. This had an agenda. The chair's scrape boomed in the silence. Crew froze in the wings. The floor manager whispered into her headset, "Do not cut. Do not cut. This is happening." Stallone now stood over George, who stayed seated, the contrast, cinematic, battle-tested veteran versus polished host in a tailored suit. You think a suit and a desk let you strip people down on live TV? Turn a man's life into a cute segment. George opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I've worked 50 years, Stallone's voice climbed. 50 years of sweat, blood, and earned respect. I won't let a former spin doctor with a smug grin and a stack of cue cards tell me what my legacy is worth. The audience went dead quiet. A woman covered her mouth. A man in back raised his phone to record. I made characters that inspired people with nothing, with scars, people who didn't speak perfectly. And now I'm mocked for my voice, for loving my daughters, for not retiring on your schedule. He stepped toward the camera, leaving George behind. I came to talk about a film about forgiveness and growth, but all you wanted was a fight. "Congratulations, George." He looked to the control room glass. "You got one?" Back to George. "You want to know what courage looks like? It's not ambushing your guest once the cameras roll. It's earning your seat at the table." Teed. "You still haven't." George finally stood, flustered. "You can't just walk out." "I'm not asking permission," Stallone said. George tried one last time. "We have a commitment to the audience." "You agreed to finish this?" Stallone's tone dropped, rage replaced by something deeper. "You broke that commitment the moment you made it personal." George threw a final jab. "You're leaving because you can't handle the truth." "No, George," Stallone turned. "I'm leaving because I can't stand the disrespect." He paused, then looked straight into the lens, then the millions watching on couches and phones. If you've ever been mocked, dismissed, or silenced for how you talk, how you look, or where you came from, don't sit in the chair they built to trap you. He walked off. No music, no graphics, no wrap-up. Just the sound of a legend leaving. George stood there, eyes wide, hands trembling. For once, the man with questions had none. The moment Stallone stepped off the GMA set, a fuse lit online. Clips from every angle exploded across feeds. Stallone walks out live. Sly refuses disrespect. The voice you mocked millions heard it. By the time he exited through a side door, his phone, still on airplane mode, was flooded with missed calls and messages. Andrea, his publicist, caught him at the curb, breathless. "You just broke the internet." Stallone stayed calm, not smug, not angry-centered. "I didn't raise my voice for the cameras," he said. "I raised it because someone finally needed to." Inside, back on set, George sat alone. No outro, no save, just heavy silence. The control room scrambled. The prompter flashed cut to weather, but no one moved. George rubbed his temples, shaken. He'd faced presidents and generals. It was the Hollywood fighter with the battered voice who left him speechless. We'll be right back," he finally muttered to camera. But they weren't, not really. That evening, ABC issued a carefully worded statement. "The views expressed are those of the hosts, not ABC. Deep respect for Mr. Stallone's contributions." It didn't land. Petitions circulated for an apology or suspension. By noon the next day, ABC's inbox buckled. They mocked his voice, questioned his relevance, prodded his family. He answered with restraint, integrity, and just enough fire. Legends don't shout. They speak once and the world listens. What did you think of George's approach? Was Stallone right to walk out? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true dramatizations. Like this, turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next.